Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a co-video for you. And actually I started to film this already, but I ended up having some kind of a computing glitch here, which is kind of appropriate for the topic. But anyways, today this video is just a disassembly discourse. I am putting back together at this point the TRM atom. Then I'll probably take apart this second one, get it all tuned up. But the topic of today's video, which is just a complete and total bonus, is simplicity in tools and why it's really, really, really important. So the thing that spurred this on was not actually related to my everyday carry tools. Generally speaking, the tools that I use in everyday carry are relatively simple, right? It's a knife. It's a knife, and this one specifically is very simple. It's a, phosphor bronze washes. There's really not that much to go wrong with it, right? And that's actually a wonderful thing. That's a virtue, and I realize every day a little bit more that using a simple tool is very often a virtue. And I'll give you an example of this. I'm a computing person. I like computers. I love computers. And a lot of my life is computers. I digitize all of the things, right? The majority, I don't have, printed photos for most of my photos. My wedding pictures, we have one print among us, right? That we did at a freaking, FedEx, right? We don't have all that. A lot of our stuff is digital. And so and I also, most of my work is digital as well. And so for me, good computer backups are crucial. Frankly, for you too. The only time, if you have not lost data yet due to a computer issue, you are lucky. Go buy a lottery ticket after you go buy a backup hard drive, right? You should always be backing up your computer. If there is anything at all that you give a damn about on your computer that you wouldn't want to lose, then you should be backing that up. Because your computer will fail. Flat out. No matter what kind of computer you're using, it will fail. Sooner or later, the hard drive inside will die. You might get some warning, you might not. Maybe it'll get corrupted. Maybe you'll get hit by ransomware. This is why you should never click links in emails. Nonetheless, there are many reasons that you might lose all your data on your computer, but there's a very, very, very real chance that you might lose all your data on your computer very quickly. And so when that happens, you want to have that data someplace else. This is what's referred to as a backup. And you can back up to a local hard drive. You can back up to an online service. You can back up, you can just back your stuff up to Google Drive if you want to give Google all your data. That's a possibility too. But the important thing is that your data exists in more than just one place, because two is one and one is none is a nice saying, and I think it's applicable in the backup world too. So backups are very important, and the only people who don't have backups are the ones who haven't been burned yet. And trust and believe, it is a yet. So anyways, I digress. Backups are crucial, and I run a lot of backups because of all of these situations. And the thing is, recently, my backup solution died unexpectedly on me. I didn't lose any data, luckily, because I checked my backup and I realized, oh, this wasn't working anymore. So I had a good copy of everything, and actually I ended up having some. But that brings me to my topic here, which is that although, most of the time the tools I'm getting into are relatively simple, on computers sometimes they can be a little more complicated, and I've tried a bunch of complicated tools for doing this relatively simple job, right? Like, my data exists in one place, I want it to also exist someplace else. And, the easiest way to do this is just copy a file to another hard drive, but you can use all these fancy tools like the ones built in. But I've tried a series of fancy tools. And just to give you, for the nerdy among you, some of the ones I have tried are Spider Oak, which is an online service kind of affair where and it's important, by the way, to have a backup of your data that's off-site too, meaning it's not in the same place as your computer. Because that means that, for instance, if there's a house fire or something like that, and I hope it doesn't happen, but, a freaking buddy of mine just had a tree fall on his freaking house. That's a way to kill your data. Right? It's not good. And so you want to have an off-site backup as well. And I've tried a bunch of different services for that. I've tried, so CrashPlan is one of them. And actually, no, I started off with Spider Oak, which is a weird company. It's built on the idea of strong encryption for your data. That's a beautiful thing. I like it a lot. But unfortunately, at the time I was using it, which would have been circa 2010 or so, maybe a little later than that, I forget exactly when, maybe 2012, it was super, super slow. And so as a result, my data wasn't reliably up there because, well, it wasn't super reliably getting there because it took so damn long to upload anything. So that was a major problem, and that was a system that didn't work that well for me as a result. It was something that was very complex, and it was meant to make this process easier, but that complexity ended up making it super slow and problematic. Next thing I tried was another commercial thing called CrashPlan. CrashPlan Plan was a fine little service. They did a good job of keeping your backups there. It was reasonably quick. It didn't cause too much in the way of trouble until it did. Until this fancy software that I was relying on, this fancy place where I can put everything upload, and it, only uploads what's changed, and it keeps a history of everything, like all that you could want in a backup system. It worked great until they updated their client, and suddenly their client sucked, meaning the software that runs on your computer. And then, after that, they decided, you know what, okay, in addition to the crappy client, we're going to stop doing this for personal users. We're just going to do for businesses. And so, yeah, suddenly all of this years of backup history that I had went poof. They gave us time. It wasn't that bad. And I didn't end up losing much in the way of data, but it was just like this elaborate system that I was locked into suddenly changed, and suddenly it sucked. And that was bad. And then recently, most recently, I've been using a system called Arc Backup. It's a program. It happens for Mac and Windows. Great software. I love this software up and down. It's wonderful because you can back up pretty much anywhere. Your backups are encrypted. It does all the things you would want, none of the things you don't. It worked very, very well. I say worked because they updated the software. I moved from version 5 to version 6. And being a trusting human, sometimes, very rarely, but, having some trust in this developer, I just went ahead and I did the upgrade. And then I noticed things were working weirdly, and then I suddenly realized that all of my backups were no longer readable. So every backup that I had, and I had like 8 different backups, and given some of them I haven't accessed yet because they're at the office, and I'm not going to the office because of the freaking Rona, but nonetheless, every backup that I had, at least for the moment, was rendered unreadable because of this update. The guy has come on and said, I'm going to fix everything. It's going to be okay. But the thing is, no, I don't buy it anymore. We're done. And that's because I was using a complex tool. At the end of the day, the only backups that I had left were very, very simple ones. They were using a program called rsync. This is a simple Unix and Linux utility that anybody who's familiar with those kinds of things is probably going to be aware of, where I just dump all of the files on my computer onto an external hard drive every so often, and then you know what? When something changes, it updates the latest copy, and if something gets deleted, it moves it to another folder. It's a really simple tool, but you know what? It's the thing that has worked. Every damn time one of these fancy-ass tools has decided, it's going to crap out on me, either because it didn't work that well to start with, because they decided, oh, we're going to change the client, and that's worse. No, or because they decided they would have stopped selling it, or because they updated the client and everything broke. Every damn time that those things failed me, you know what still worked? This simple thing. The dumb tool. The tool that exists on every freaking machine, at least Unix and Linux machine, that is the one that has never lost my data. And that kind of sent home for me. Sent home? That's not a thing. Brought home? Look, English is really hard, okay? I'm trying over here. But it did something in the homeward direction to me of this lesson that complex tools fail so much more often. And this is, this is something we know to be universally true in other elements of our lives, right? I mean, every time you have an electric screwdriver, I'm trying to think of how many electric screwdrivers I've gone through in my life. Not that many, but a disturbingly large number for my age, right? I probably had 3 different electric screwdrivers die, like electric drills die. And I mean, by the way, battery powered, and usually that's the point. But anytime that you have something that is more complex, you have a failure mode, right? Now I'm trying to think of how many just flat-out piece of freaking metal screwdrivers have died on me. And that answer is 0. I mean, I've had bits go out, but these things don't freaking die because they're a simple tool, right? And so I keep coming back to this. And so my solution, by the way, for the nerds in the audience here, was to just freaking be done with it. And I signed up with a different service, and this service is called rsync.net. It's a sync platform, basically, but all it does is it gives you a server that you can rsync up to, that you can dump your data up to, and it works, and it's easy, and then they do snapshotting, but the only tool that you're using is rsync, and that's the only tool that's freaking worked. And so it's a nerdy solution. Absolutely, it is a super nerdy solution. If you are not a sysadmin, either at heart or in practice, it's probably not the best one for you. But for me, it's the simplest solution because it uses simple tools. And that's important to me. And that's got me thinking. This whole debacle, I have just now gotten to the point after this all happened on Sunday. Yeah, I think on Sunday. And I'm filming this on a freaking Wednesday. I'm just now getting back to the point where I have a backup again off-site. And that's kind of a clenching time for somebody whose entire life is online. If all of your off-site backups suddenly go away because of a bad software choice, you got a problem, right? And actually, that's not true. I had an rsync backup at work because I kind of knew this at some deep level, but this is just making me realize that, damn it, complex tools kind of suck. This is not to say that there's not a role for a complex tool. Sometimes you need one, and sometimes that's the most efficient, solution. Sometimes the only way you can get a job done is with a tool of greater complexity. I get that. And there are definitely complex tools out there that work great, but they are a point of fragility. They are something that causes trouble. This actually, bringing this back to everyday carry gear, because I know a number of you probably already glazed over and thought, okay, what's a backup? Is that like reverse on my car? No, coming back to everyday carry gear, this actually hammers home a point that was first made actually by Jason Hui. Hui, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name. I apologize, but this is the guy who runs Prometheus Lights. DocSucks.com is the website. He makes the Prometheus Alpha, the Delta, the Beta. He does a bunch of these lights. Thing is, his lights never include a feature that I love, and that is USB charging. His lights do not have on board a little hole, kind of a USB charged light. It does not have one of these things on board. And as a result, you have to take the battery out and put it into an external charger. And his argument against doing that has always been two things, like A, anybody who owns one of my lights, because they tend to be very expensive, they're kind of fashionable, that kind of thing. Anyone who owns one of my lights is is probably a flashlight enthusiast already, so they probably have a charger, so it's not a crucial thing. But B, more importantly, is that it makes the light, it's a point of failure. It's another area where the light can go wrong. And I'd kind of written that off. I'd kind of said, okay, sure, you're right, but if you do it right, it should be okay. And it is a simplicity in your daily life, right? Because if you're carrying around a light that's USB charged, chances are you already have a USB charger in your life. So recharging your flashlight is just as easy as plugging it in, plugging the side of the damn thing into a USB cable. But this whole thing has made me kind of rethink the backup thing, but also the thinking that's come after this has made me rethink that stance. Has made me think to myself, okay, true, there's an added cost in complexity. And I've done this, simplicity versus complexity. I've kind of done this video a little bit before, but I came down on a slightly different side of it, right? Because if you think about it, yes, it is simpler to only have one type of cable, to not carry a separate battery charger, etc. Yeah, 100% that is true. That is an improvement. However, I have moved the simplicity out of the tool that I'm depending on and put complexity into that tool. Basically, there is another point of failure inside this light, and so as a result, the light could fail in a way that it wouldn't if it just took another battery. If I just moved the complexity of charging into something that's designed to do complicated charging, right? So I'm really rethinking in light of all this, and this is probably me overthinking things, and hopefully this video is at least mildly interesting to folks who overthink things in the same way, but I'm kind of rethinking my stance on what he was saying, that, maybe at some level, because at some level, every time that you add, a charger into a flashlight, the flashlight itself gets more complicated, and every time the flashlight itself gets more complicated, that's way too tight, but every time the flashlight gets more complicated, it gains another way to fail, and every time it gains another way to fail, it probably will fail sooner or later in the dock, etc. I'm starting to think that Jason might be onto something. I'm starting to think that maybe, the generation, I still very much like USB charging. It's like a gift light or something like that. That's kind of the way to go. But maybe it is true that what we should be doing is using a flashlight for the tool it's intended to do, or for the thing it's intended to do, namely flashing light around, and then use a charger for the thing it's intended to do, and that way we can have a simple charger and a simple flashlight, and everything will kind of work out in the end. I don't know. Like I said, there's a complexity cost there as well. And I like I said, I've talked about this a little bit itself. And then the problem comes like, do I throw a flashlight charger into my backpack? Is that smart? Is that a loss of simplicity? Like, what the heck is going on with my life? But this really put a different perspective on it for me. And so I'm sort of thinking about this in terms of just my life, my carry, etc. What tools are needlessly complex? Because the needlessly complex ones tend to be the ones that fail soonest. I mean, when was the last time you had a hammer fail? Like, it's a freaking chunk of metal attached to a freaking chunk of wood, and if the wood breaks, you replace the wood, and if the metal breaks, well, I guess you could replace the metal, but then you gotta like if you're replacing the handle and the head, If your head on a hammer breaks, then you bought a bad hammer. But nonetheless, you know what I'm saying here. Simple tools don't tend to fail as often. So I think, I don't know. I'm still trying to think through this myself, but I'm realizing that over and over again, every time I try and do something fancy and complex, it tends to fail more readily. And by the way, watches. Oh my God, watches. Right now, I have expensive freaking mechanical watches, and then I have a G-Shock. This is just on my table for review. This was actually a gift from my godparents, who knew I had the channel and thought, hey, this would be a fun thing to review. But anyways, it's just a random G-Shock. But you know what? This is going to be way more durable than the fancy $4,000 Omega. That's just a fact of existence, right? And so that's yet another case of a simple tool potentially, doing a better job in these situations. So this is making me kind of just rethink a number of things in my life. Like, where am I using complicated tools when I could be using something simple? And how important is it if that complicated tool fails? Okay, one could make an argument that there are a lot of complicated tools out there that, either need to be complicated. Like, for instance, a print is kind of a complicated thing in practice, and especially when you start doing things like networking on the print, it gets to be a bit of a pain. But, there are things that need to be complicated, but there are things that don't need to be. And if those things need to be complicated, how critical are they? In that case, you might want to have a second one around. You might have an alternate strategy. Backups, rest assured, I've had alternate strategies, and that's gotten me through, but it's just like, guys, I don't know. So this is a rant. This is just a Class 5 rant, but I've been thinking about this after having this yet another complicated system that promised to solve all of my problems, end up failing on me completely and causing more problems. Actually, it didn't end up causing problems, but it sure could have. That would have been a crappy time to drop my laptop down a sewer or something. Doesn't happen very often, by the way, but, it's a thing, I guess. Do I have to tighten this? Yeah, I do. Tighten that down and loosen it a little bit. But yeah, it's just gotten me thinking about all of this whole situation and about what kind of things I want to use in my life. Tell me in the comments, please, because this is something I'm working through, as you're hearing right now. But tell me what complicated tools in your life you've replaced with simpler ones, and how is that better? Cooking, you get all these complicated kitchen doodads, but professional chefs, they just cut things with a freaking knife. Do you need a fancy rolling garlic peeler? No, you just crush it. And so tell me places where you've found complexity in your life and where you've replaced that complexity. Tell me what you're thinking about this. Am I crazy? Is this, let's throw this into a discussion. So anyways, there you go. Just kind of a rant, but it's the end of the day, there's a lot to be said for a relatively simple tool that does that thing relatively simply, and ends up, it's always weird doing this under a camera, right? And ends up, a little too loose, ends up serving you better over a longer term and has fewer failure modes. Maybe Jason was right. Maybe I'll send him this video after all. Anyways, there you go. I hope this was interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.